Good afternoon, and greetings to all of you out there watching us on Care Florida's Facebook page, YouTube channel, and Care California San Francisco Bay Area on their Care Facebook page. Welcome to Care Florida's social lunch hour. Today, we're going to be speaking with two authors who wrote the very special book called Flying Over Water about the Syrian refugees who come to the United States and the challenges they face through the eyes of a middle school girl and her best friend here in the United States. With that, I would like to introduce the co-authors of the book, Shannon Hitchcock and Nahid Senzai, to the program. Welcome. Thank you very much, both of you very much for being here today. And just to start off, I loved your book. It was a page turner for me. My daughter actually read it before I did because she saw it lying on my desk. And she says, "Baba, what's this?" And we use the word Baba because in India, where I'm from, dads are Baba too, which is important because that is how our female protagonist Noura addresses her father in this book. So without further ado, Shannon, can you please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
My name is Shannon Hitchcock. I am an author, and I grew up in North Carolina, but I lived in Tampa, Florida for about 12 years, where the book is set. And this is my first time writing as a co-author, and so I really enjoyed my time spent with Nahid, and I think we both learned a lot in the process.
Well, thank you, Shannon. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I hope everybody's having a blessed Ramadan and staying safe out there. My name is Nahid Hasnat Senzai, and I was born in Chicago, and I've been traveling ever since. I am sitting here in the San Francisco Bay Area, which is home, but I grew up in the Middle East and came back to the US for college, and always wanted to write children's books ever since the 5th grade. And Shannon invited me to work on this book with her, and it was a blast. It was a lot of fun. So looking forward to chatting with you today.
Great. Well, that sort of goes into my first question. How did both of you meet? Because obviously Shannon is here in the East Coast and you're on the West Coast. How did you come together to write this book?
Well, it's kind of interesting how it all came about. For me, it started at Hyde Park United Methodist Church, and Vicki Walker, the Reverend Vicki Walker, had a picture up on her wall of a Syrian refugee and her young son, and it said, "We are from Syria. Can you help us?" And I asked Vicki about the picture, and she told me she'd taken it on vacation. She'd been in Turkey, and she'd spoken with this woman and her son, and she'd given them some apples. And she brought the picture back to Tampa. It was on her wall, and she felt like the picture was inspiring her that our church should be helping the Syrian refugees who were resettling in the Tampa Bay area. I wanted to help, and I thought the best way I could help was by telling a story. And so I wanted to write a middle grade novel about a Christian girl whose church is helping a Syrian refugee family. And all of that was very true to what was happening in my church. But I was very concerned that I might not get all of the details correct, especially around Islam. And so decided to seek a co-author. And so what happened on that is I read Nahid's book. She's the author of a wonderful book called Escape from Aleppo. Yes, that's it. And when I read that book, I thought she would be the perfect person to work with. And so Nahid always laughs and says, my people contacted her people. But my agent sent Nahid's agent a letter describing the project and asking her if she'd like to work with me And then Nahid, why don't you jump in and take it from there?
Certainly. So I was sitting here in the Bay Area, and my agent reached out to me and said, "Hey, there's this author, and she's written a book, and she's looking for a co-author, and she's looking for a story based in Syria." And I had just finished, Escape from Aleppo had come out that year, and honestly speaking, so my background also is I've lived in the Middle East, and my husband teaches Middle East politics here at Santa Clara University in California. So we're a very political family, very well versed in the politics of the region. And so I was burnt out. I mean, it was such a harrowing story writing Nadia's story about Aleppo. So many terrible things have happened there. So I was a bit leery. So I asked my agent to ask Shannon's people to send me a copy of the manuscript and her initial manuscript. So she sent that, and I read it, and I just automatically connected with the story. But then I thought, writing a book with someone is like entering a marriage, right? You've got to, have your first meeting. This is an arranged marriage, right? We're coming together. And I spoke to Shannon on the phone, and we hit it off really well. Shannon is amazingly gracious. She was inviting me in a way into her home, into her novel. And she was very open to my ideas and my concerns and my vision. And once we figured out that we could work together, we jumped into it, feet first.
Fantastic. So then let's go a little bit into the actual writing of the book. And so sort of explain, when did you write the book and then ask Shannon, did you write the book and then ask for a co-author after an outline was written, or how did that sort of go about?
I had an entire first draft, and the entire first draft, though, was told from Jordan's viewpoint. And so whenever Nahid and I started talking, she thought it would be so much better if it was told in alternating chapters, and if the Muslim character could speak for herself. And so honestly, the plot changed exponentially. So although I had a draft, we didn't feel like we had to stick to it. We actually replotted this manuscript, if you will. We replotted it. We used Google Docs, and we laid out the book chapter by chapter. And then we wrote in alternating chapters. I would send her a chapter. She would send me a chapter. And we just went back and forth like that until we were done. Fantastic.
But did you develop the character of Noura originally, or was that Nahid's input?
Yes, I had the character Noura in the original manuscript. I had the entire Syrian family in the original manuscript. Now Nahid changed some names because she wanted to make it her own, and she wanted to make them come alive to her. And so I remember you changed the mother to Muna, right? And I believe you changed the father as well, his name.
And the brothers.
Yeah, and the brothers. The only character that's name stayed the same was Noura.
Yeah. She's actually, Noura. I think as writers, we are connected to names. I know I have lists of names that I keep. And actually, Noura is my very good friend, my best friend who's in Miami, her daughter. So I was like, I thought it was apropos. It was a connection.
I had no idea.
Oh, no, I didn't tell you? Okay.
Yeah, no, I didn't know that. I didn't know that.
Well, just an informational part too. My father's youngest brother's daughter, my cousin, is also Noura. So I'm going to send her a copy of the book just to say, look, you have a namesake here in this book. So that's fantastic. Shannon, are any of the characters? I know that you mentioned within the book that in your postscript that you met some refugees in the Tampa area.
Yes.
Did you meet the young girls, or did you meet the families? And did you then use those girls or the families to base the character around?
Actually, both. I went into a Syrian home and met with the mom, the dad, the and two teenage girls. And then I also had another time when one of the people who works for with Janet Blair brought a group of Syrian girls to meet me, and there were maybe 5 or 6 of them, and we met at a Starbucks and just chatted. So both.
Fantastic. So you've actually answered the question already about what made you decide to write about refugees. Are these the first refugees that you had ever met while being here in Tampa, or actually in the United States? Because, as you know, at this time in the past few years, refugees have gotten a lot of negative publicity in the media, and people, I don't think, realize, and I think you touch on it a little bit in the book. Maybe you can go forward. The difficulties refugees have in the asylum process. It is not a simple process in the least, and that is not what was given out in the media. They're saying, "Oh my God, there's no vetting of these people. How do we know that that they're good and that they're not going to cause problems here in the United States?" Can you talk a little bit about that? Nahid as well.
Nahid, why don't you jump in there first?
Okay, let me tackle that. So a great question, actually, because people don't realize not only the vetting, but the families have to pay back the money. And Shannon and I had a conversation about this when we were doing our research and speaking to refugee families. So Baba has this burden on him because he has to pay the government back the X $1,000s that were spent on bringing him over into this country. So people don't realize that, it's not just a free ticket. They're coming here to have the great American life. They have years of vetting before them. And then once they're here, they have to pay back those costs.
The other thing that I found out as Nahid and I started to work together is Nahid is actually married to an Afghani refugee.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that's what struck me as part of the story as well. So my husband's family, his father got his PhD at the University of Madison in Wisconsin in the 70s and had gone back to Afghanistan to teach at Kabul University. And when the Soviets invaded, he had 2 choices, become a communist or become a mujahideen. And neither of those tickled his fancy. So he left Afghanistan, they escaped, excuse me, and they came back to the US. And their family was helped by some wonderful church organizations when they came back to the US. So there definitely was a resonance in this story and in his.
I know that you wrote in the book part of the group project that they're working on in their wonderful social studies class. I love the teacher. I love that character. I just have to tell you, I wish I had more teachers like that when I was growing up, because he was more knowledgeable about civics than a lot of people that I know. But can you talk about a little bit how they came up with the idea about what immigration is and what asylum is, what a refugee is, what an immigrant versus a refugee? Because too many times you get the idea that here in the United States, they don't know the difference. So maybe you can expound a little bit upon that.
I first wanted to say that the character of Mr. Fowler is based on a teacher that my own son had in 8th grade. It was actually his American history teacher, but his name was Mr. Fowler. And he was just the kind of wonderful teacher, just like this man, that made kids really curious about the world around them. And so, if you will, this was my saying thank you to him for being such a wonderful teacher and the way that he inspired his students and kind of made history come alive. And so I wanted a teacher in the book that was very similar to that. And then the interesting thing was when Nahid got a hold of that character, she wrote about his name being like pecking chickens, I think, or something like that. And I thought I never thought about that. I just used the name because my son had a teacher that was named Mr. Fowler. But yeah, we used actual an actual social studies curriculum for Florida. We looked it up online, and I actually printed out the curriculum.
And again, could you again a little bit about like why he concentrated and he had, I don't know if you wrote this part or Nahid wrote this part, but when they were discussing what the difference is between the immigrant and the refugee. Because again, a lot of people on Facebook who are watching now, maybe they don't truly understand that distinction, and there is a big one.
Yeah, well, a refugee is fleeing their home because they don't have any choice, right? Because of whether it be because of bombs or physical threats to themselves, whereas an immigrant is leaving because they are choosing to, because they want a better opportunity. And so that's a huge difference. You know, the Syrian civil war has displaced millions of people.
Great. I know that you've now written about a little bit of the challenges that Noura faced when her and Amar, her brother, went to school for the first time. For example, we wrote. I still remember to this day because I had to do it in performing the ablution, the wudu, in school. Can you talk a little bit about that scene, which was one of my favorite actually in the book because again I experienced it.
Right. So part of the story was, you know, Shannon and I were dealing with some pretty serious topics, right? The Muslim ban, ban, build the wall, ban the Muslims. So we wanted to, at least in my goal was to bring in some humor into serious subjects. And I just perceived, I mean, this is an issue faced by a lot of Muslim kids. How do you prepare for prayer and how do you pray in school? And so my kids are too young to actually actively do that in school right now. But I, just put, went, as we writers say, we're actually really, in our mind, we have a 12-year-old, child in our mind who kind of, we animate through our words. And I said, prayer is going to be a big part of this prayer room that's part of the book. So they've got to be praying. So what do? You have to do wudu. So that's where that whole scene comes in where, Noura's doing her wudu in the bathroom and some girls come in.
Right. I found it interesting because I've done the same thing because we need as part of the wudu, the ablution before the feet actually have to get wet. And how do you do that in a bathroom? You put your feet in the sink. Mm-hmm. And then for those who are not familiar with that, they're going to look at you funny. And those girls looked at her and she was very gracious. Noura was very gracious about it, how she handled it. I thought that was fantastic because I would have probably turned red in the face and not known what to do if I was her age. So that was actually fantastic. I know that you both got this book published through Scholastic. And I know that you said that Andrea Pinkney was what is basically a catalyst to get this book published. Can you both tell me like how did she affect the sort of how this book got to where I read it? Because right here.
Well, anytime you get a book published, there has to be an acquiring editor, and that is somebody who actually, buys the book. And they have a lot that they have to go through to actually get the book published. They have to go before a committee, and they have to do, financials and say that they think this book can be profitable because, after all, publishing is a business. And so you have to have somebody who not only is interested enough to go through all that process, but then becomes your in-house champion to get the book published. And Andrea was all of that for us.
Right. I mean, if I can add, Andrea is joining us actually today. So hi, Andrea. She just as absolutely. There's two sides of publishing, right? One is the art, and the other is the business. And as authors, we try to write the best books possible, but it has to be a profit-making endeavor. So an editor balances both sides. So you need an editor like Andrea who believes in the book, in the authors, in the vision, in the scope of the project. And then she has to convince everybody in marketing and sales, etc. And she's been an amazing champion for us. So she really believed in the story and us doing it together. She actually gave us tight deadlines too. So actually, Shannon and I agreed to do this. We had 3 months to write the book. And I always say, the good thing about writing a book together is you only have to write half a book. So, and she was with us the whole way. As an editor, she gives us feedback. She reads our manuscript. So that's kind of that relationship we have with our editor.
Fantastic. And I actually also wanted to ask you a little bit actually about the front cover of the book. I know that this is a scene from within the book where they travel out to the quay. Can you expand a little bit upon that scene, as well as the actual title of the book, Flying Over Water?
Nahid, why don't you handle the scene at Shell Key Preserve, and then I can talk about the title.
Okay. So part of it was, we can have an entire conversation on the craft of writing, but as writers, we always want to have themes and concepts in our books. And for us, Jordan is actually a competitive swimmer. And Nora loves birds. So her father had a beautiful hotel in Aleppo that was destroyed. And one of the things in the hotel was it was full of birds. So this theme kind of carries through the novel, where Nora is always fascinated with birds and Jordan with swimming. So fish and birds play a big role in the book. And part of the story is also Nora's deathly afraid of water. Because one of her friends drowned in one of those terrible ships that traveled the Aegean Sea between Turkey and Greece. I'm sure you guys remember the terrible photograph of Aydan Kursi, the little boy who drowned in that situation. So Nora is deathly afraid of water, and Jordan's a swimmer. So you can imagine what kind of interactions that brings. So part of the cover is about these girls going out to. You're going to have to remember, Shannon, I don't remember. Oh, Shell Key Preserve. Shell Key Preserve, which is a real place where they have migrating birds. So they go out to see these birds.
So the title struck me because of something that Nahid had written. And I believe it is on the first page. And they are actually flying over water. And that is when she is coming to the United States. And when I read Flying Over Water, it really struck with me because I have a song I love called Flying Over Water by Jason Isbell. And so when I read Flying Over Water, it reminded me of the song. And I started thinking, that would be an interesting title for the book. And then, of course, after I thought that, we started weaving it throughout the manuscript. And then the very last thing is a poem that I wrote called Flying Over Water to kind of tie the whole thing together.
Right. If I can add, flight is about, being a refugee, a fleeing. Water is, Jordan's domain, and Nora's is the air. So that's where that balance comes in.
And again, when I read it, I like when she looks out right before they're arriving in Tampa, right before they land, she looks out the windows, even though she's scared of the water, and she sees that's very special bird. I can't remember the actual name of the bird right now, with the pink wings in the bill.
Yeah, roseate spoonbill.
And I saw that on the cover. What you mentioned a little bit earlier is also of interest to a lot of people, because PTSD and panic attacks are a couple of mental health issues with both of these girls have. Like Nahid just mentioned, Noura has a fear of water because of what happened to her best friend. I think her name is Mariam. On their flight from Turkey to Greece. However, Shannon, maybe you can describe a little bit about some of the, I guess, panic attacks is, I think, what we were using for Jordan's character. Can you go on a little bit about why Jordan also has suffered? And I found it very, very interesting in that just lead in how Noura got some treatment that helped Jordan in a certain situation. I was hoping maybe you could expand a little bit about that.
Yeah, I whenever I start a new book project, I read lots of things, some of them loosely related, but I read the autobiography of the Olympic swimmer Missy Franklin, and Missy suffered panic attacks. And so I thought, oh, that would be wonderful, a wonderful addition to the book. And I think the reason it really struck with me is at one point I had panic attacks. Now mine had a physical cause, although we didn't realize it at the time. Mine were from a heart condition, and I had to have a cardiac ablation to fix mine. But so I knew what those attacks felt like. And so when I read Missy's story, then it just really, it really dovetailed with something I'd experienced in my own life. And so that was why. And then I just had Jordan's attacks triggered because her mom had miscarried a baby, and it had happened during one of her swim meets. And so then anytime she would go back to the water to swim competitively, she would kind of have a flashback, and she would remember that.
And like I said, it was a very sweet scene because some of the help that Noura got when she was at her refugee camp in Turkey, the breathing techniques that she learned to calm herself, is what she used to actually help Jordan when she got there, to calm her down a little bit as much as she could at the scene. And I found that wonderful because it shows, like, even though something tragic has happened, it could be turned to good to help other people. And I found that a very, very important scene in the book.
I think if I can add, we really want to address mental health in this book because we feel as if it's not addressed enough, and especially for children, especially during this pandemic and everything else. I think we all suffered 4 years of trauma in the last few years before January, not to go into politics. So I think part of it was that Noura, as children of war, suffer PTSD, horrific, mental and health issues. So Noura was lucky enough because there are a lot of Syrian physicians from the United States and other places had gone back to refugee camps to help children and adults alike. And so it was really important for us to make sure that we address the issue, but also provide solutions and to normalize it in a way, say it's okay to feel like this, and what can you do to find help?
And it was interesting that you talked a little bit about her brother having a scar because he was involved with an airstrike. And just to show you, he does not suffer the same the PTSD that his sister did, even though what he might have gone through was worse. So it just shows like how mental illness affects everyone either more or less to that extent. And I did want, actually, you brought it up a little bit about politics, and you write in the book that this family arrived at the first day of the Muslim ban. As we at Care Florida, we're a civil rights organization. We help refugees, we help people in immigration to come to the United States to be with their families and everything. And this affected our community, the Muslim community, quite strongly. And it's a very important part of this book as well. I was just wondering if you can expand a little bit about that.
Well, I will tell you that setting the book at the time of the Muslim ban was Nahid's idea. And I think that probably came from her being Muslim and realizing much more so than I would have. I mean, I could see it on the news, and that's one thing, but to actually feel that it is impacting you and people that you know personally is a whole different thing. And so whenever she wanted to set the book then, I thought it was a brilliant idea, but it was totally Nahid. So if you want to address that.
Absolutely. So Shannon also, and myself, to pull back a little bit, we like in our novels, in our books, tackle difficult issues, right? And part of it is we feel that kids are really smart. They know what's going on. They may not be listening to the news actively, but they're in the back seat and they're absorbing everything else that's going on in this world. So my goal always is when I write is to introduce and tackle difficult things, because I think it affects kids and they need tools and places where they can discuss and think about it. So for me as a Muslim, the Muslim ban just really made me mad, right? Frankly. And it just went against the ethos of what this country stands for. And I wanted to pull the book because Shannon did an amazing job with her initial manuscript, but it was slated a few years before. It included, the Tampa mosque burning, which actually did happen. And she did a beautiful job of actually the mayor of Tampa coming out and saying the wonderful things he did in supporting the community. So we wanted to bring in these tough things like mosque burnings and, the Muslim ban, because we want kids to understand what drives these kinds of things and if it affects them on how to deal with it.
Great. And like I said, part of the reason we host these programs is to try to, we have something called educate, protect, and advocate. So we're trying to educate the people on issues like the Muslim ban. And the best way of doing that is through, a lot of times is through a story, which is wonderful that is through this book. And I want to talk a little bit more about, like, you said it was based on what happened. Part of the book is also that there was an arson attack on a mosque in the book, which is based in real life, as you said. And this is actually, unfortunately, not uncommon in the past few years, and we need to really understand that. And I'm glad that you wrote the book like that. Another topic that you actually touched on a little bit in the book is a little bit of the bullying that happened in schools, because Muslims within Florida and everywhere else, if they choose to wear the hijab like Noura does, they face certain challenges, let's put it that way, at school from others. And you touched upon that in that there was one character, Alexander, towards the end of the book, that really negatively affected the project that the kid that Noura, Amar, and Jordan were working on, in that he destroyed a model. Can you talk a little bit about that scene? Because that's important.
Well, in that case, what we were trying to show is how some of the negativity that comes from adults, how that filters down, and then children absorb that and then behave the same way. I mean, kids aren't born prejudiced, right? They're taught prejudice. And so that is what that scene was all about. That, as well as the scene toward the end where the prayer room is vandalized. Both of those were us just showing how adults are really perpetuating a problem, and then it just the negative consequences then affect the kids.
Right. I actually wanted to talk a little bit about the prayer room. I know that you, Shannon, mentioned that that was a bit of Nahid's idea. Can we talk a little bit about that whole section of the book where they decided, because they had to move from place to place within the school, to find a place to pray? And can you, for our audience, can you say how that prayer room came to be and the significance of it within the scope of the book?
So as Shannon said, I know for me, we like to incorporate things that are rooted in reality. Writing a novel is fiction, but fiction is always great when you can, for example, in the book, I love it. Your state of Florida is amazing that you banned a ban on straws, right? And that made it into the book because it's so ridiculous. So the fact that Noor and Amar, and there are other Muslim kids in the school, cannot find a place to pray, I thought, well, how have other school districts tackled this? So there was actually a legal case in Texas where a bunch of Muslim kids were praying, and some parents of a certain ilk did not like that. And it became a court case. And what was decided was that kids can have a room, which is non-denominational, where they can come together for contemplation and prayer. And we thought, that's great. And one of those, we wanted to show a diverse school with a bunch of kids from different backgrounds. So there's one character I love who's Jewish, right? And we talk about the mosque vandalization, but we also mention a Sikh temple shooting there, and the vandalization of a Jewish cemetery. So we want to draw parallels between, this happening to many different communities. And so the kids come together and they create a space where you can come to pray if you like, but if you want to just contemplate, you want to do some meditation. So that's where that room came from.
And can you talk a little bit about like how all the kids, mostly in teacher Mr. Fowler's class, how they came together to basically put the room together? Because I found that very, very sweet, and it warmed my heart to read that section, and which leads to, again, I'll get to that in a little bit later, sort of almost a tragedy towards the end of the book.
Well, because these kids were friends, they, all the kids who came together to put the prayer room together, they already were friends. They had a relationship. And because of that, they wanted to help. So it was really kind of that simple, but then it also sort of became everybody's room, because no matter why you wanted to go there, Jordan wanted to go because it helped her from her panic attacks. It was a place to be quiet. And then we had Penny who went there to meditate. And, so people went for different reasons, but they all went because they were friends.
Right. And what's sort of the tragedy that I'm referring to is towards the end of the book, the room was showing a little bit of I don't know exactly what word, but the prejudice that maybe adults have imprinted upon children. The room was vandalized, and that really led to actually the really nice ending of the book, which I won't get into, but they were able to then come together. What I want to talk about a little bit is after this happened, and they had a school board hearing on this room afterwards. Can you talk a little bit about, was that based in reality, or is that something that you sort of made up for the book?
Oh, Shannon, that's all yours. Shannon fell on the sword for that one. She'll explain how that came about.
Well, we decided that, and rather than getting into a court case, which is what happened in Texas, that it would just be a lot easier to have a school board meeting. And so I had never attended a school board meeting, but for anybody who has not, there are loads of them online. You can watch actual school board meetings. And so I spent a good day and a half watching school board meetings, because I wanted to be sure that I could portray one accurately. And then there is a woman who is a broadcast journalist that, as part of her job, had covered school board hearings. And after I had written it, then I sent it to her and said, can you review this chapter and make sure that I picked up this information correctly, and that I didn't write anything that would cause school boards across the country to, be offended or throw up their hands or whatever. So I watched a lot of them online, and then I had it reviewed by somebody who used to cover them for a newspaper.
And they're not very exciting.
They're not very exciting. So Nahid said I took one for the team on that because I watched all those school board hearings.
Great. And whose idea was it between you to have like the actual class go up and make their presentation to the board? Because I really liked how, I mean, I really got the difference in personalities of all the characters by what their speeches were. And that, again, that's probably the art of writing, but it really engaged me hearing them speak. Can you talk a little bit about that?
I don't remember. Do you remember how?
No. The only thing we did is we split up that chapter into two so that both Shannon and I had an opportunity to animate our characters. But the beauty of writing together is we were so in the weeds in each other's words. We kind of knew each other's characters because, you know, in Shannon's chapter, she would do the dialogue for Nora, right? And in my chapters, I would do the dialogue for Jordan. So it just, you know, it was very organic. There was no, you know, one brilliant idea. It just came together.
Great. And also, I appreciated that Jordan had to do a little bit of adjustments with her friends when she told them about her responsibility as being an ambassador to Noura's family. And there was an adjustment needed for her friends because I guess one of her oldest swim friends, her brother was in the military and who happened to die in Iraq. So you got, I think you got a good perspective of why someone would hold resentment against people, because you even talk about it in the little book in that he was killed in a majority Muslim country. So that might help explain why they think that, these people are the who killed my brother. And can you talk a little bit about like how that's a very touchy topic. So
yeah,
give a little bit more exposition on that.
Well, I think in some cases the problem is blaming a whole group of people for the actions of only a few. And you know, I always when I went and met with the Syrian girls at Starbucks and I went into the Syrian home, I just thought if everybody did this, we wouldn't have nearly so much prejudice in the world. You know, if you actually got to know people and treated them as individuals rather than, you know, looking at a large group, you know, it's really about getting to know each other, I think.
Right.
That's
if I can add to that,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, Shannon put it beautifully. I mean, part of the reason is why we write these books, because, you know, you could be in a very homogenous area. I mean, this book could be on a library shelf in Iowa, with a very homogenous town. But this is a way for them, kids who may not know Muslim characters or a swimmer or someone who's Jewish or Sikh, to look, you know, in writing, we have something called windows and mirrors, where a book, it will either serve as a window where someone from a community outside of the characters in the book looks in and looks at the lives of others, or a mirror. So you are a perfect mirror, Baba, right? You read this book and you found the word Baba and you're like, whoa, you know, there's a Baba in here and there's a Noura in here. So it's a mirror book because it reflects your background and your culture. So we hope that these books kind of serve as those friends, and for people to get to know people of other cultures. And that's the way that we're, you know, hopefully going to, you know, kind of break those barriers. And another thing is both Shannon love food and I love food. So food plays a big role. And we feel as if people can just eat together more and share each other's food. You know, I'm sure there's many, perhaps someone who wanted to build a wall who loves burritos. Isn't that a dichotomy?
Of course. Just one, I think we've covered all the things that I would like to talk about. Is there any aspect of the book that both of you would think that we haven't covered that you think is important?
You were very thorough, Emma.
You were very thorough. I would just say, I would echo what Nahid said, is that we really want the book to just promote being friends with people who you'll find you have a lot in common with, even though you have some differences. And we just hope it promotes understanding.
Right. Yeah, we call it a kind of, a bridges to understanding book. And the fact that, look, Jordan's friend whose brother was killed, her anger is justified, right? We shouldn't negate, right, such an anger and such a feeling, but we have to help people understand where it's really coming from. And I think that's part of it. We can't, even for kids, you can't say that something, unless it's blatant racism, of course, people's feelings are rooted in a place, and you have to understand the root cause of issues. And I like to say the world is not black and white, it's shades of gray. And so we hope that this book kind of helps that conversation come along.
Well, thank you. I mean, we at CARES, our mission is to educate. And like I said, we have studies out there that show that within the United States, which has 330 million people in it, a study was done that 50% of the population of the United States has never met a Muslim person in person. So what they're getting is impressions of Muslims from the media, which is almost overwhelmingly negative. Books like yours, books like Flying Over Water, I hope will help change that narrative in the future. And with that, I would like to thank you both very much for joining us today. This conversation was wonderful. I've recommended your book to all of my relatives, and I think you'll find a lot in there that you'll enjoy. Especially, like I said, all of our family, we're all Baba. If all the fathers are there, and I just really enjoyed that. So thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Yes, thank you for having us, and best of luck in your work as well.
Oh, thank you. We appreciate it. Thank you both.
Thank you.